Welcome to the Comics Coffee Metal Podcast, episode 44.
Welcome to the Comics Coffee Metal Podcast. I'm your host, Don Cardenas. We have a packed show today, and I also have an extremely awesome guest, and we're going to get right to it. So, to lead off this awesomeness, before we jump into any recommendations about comics, music, sponsors, any of that, I have to bring up the awesome Kickstarter from Mario Candelaria and Andy Michael called Fogline. You might remember Mario as a guest from earlier this year. He is an awesome writer, an awesome human being, and I just love the concept for this comic. It is a one-shot. It is the story of a man who is been haunted by a fatal hit and run that he hid the evidence of many years ago, and now a true crime podcast has kind of started to unearth the mystery of what happened to this person, and things just kind of go off the rails from there. It's an awesome looking Kickstarter. Andy Michael's art is amazing. Mario is a fantastic writer. It just launched on Kickstarter. Again, it's called Fogline. I'll make sure there's a link in the show notes. This is not sponsored. I'm just a fan, and I can't wait to read this book. Okay, so for the comic book recommendation this week, I am leaning on yet another previous guest. If you've been listening to the show long enough, you know that I had a fantastic chat during Halloween with Dave SCHEIDT, an amazing writer and great dude. And he has an awesome new all-ages book coming out called Mayor Good Boy from Penguin Random House. Right now it's available for pre-order. I'll make sure there's links in the description box below and all that. But yeah, Mayor Good Boy it's an all-ages book, but it's really all ages. It's got a lot of funny jokes in there. Dave's a funny guy, and he packs a lot of his writing with heart, along with, a good fart joke here and there. Mayor Good Boy is about a fluffy talking dog named Good Boy who is elected mayor of a town, and all of a sudden he finds that he needs some help in doing so. So he is joined up with the quick-thinking Abby Abelman and her younger brother Aaron, and it's got a whole bunch of hijinks, a whole bunch of funny circumstances, and it's just a really charming book. If you have younger ones in your life, mainly from reading age up, and they like good silly stuff, this is definitely worth it. It's packed full of stellar art from Miranda Harmon, and yeah, if your kids like stuff from Dave Pilkey or Nickelodeon cartoons and Raina Telgemeier and stuff like that, they're gonna love this. This is a metal show, so to speak. So an all ages book isn't always the go-to, but as a father myself, I can't wait for my kids to read this book. It's just really great, and the fact that it's coming from a friend and former guest is just even sweeter. But yeah, Mayor Good Boy, Penguin Random House. It's available for pre-order everywhere. It's only $9. It's such an easy sell. Just get it for your kids in your life. Make sure you read it yourself first, because you're definitely going to enjoy it. Mayor Good Boy. It's going to be the next big thing. Alright, once again this week, I am sponsored by the awesome Chuck Beebe and his album NOSK of the Void. For the past couple weeks, we've been giving out free Bandcamp download codes for the album, and we are still doing that. We have a few left. I've had quite a few takers, and yeah, it's just a fantastic album. It's based off or inspired by the video game Hollow Knight, and Chuck, along with being just an amazing cartoonist and artist, he's a great musician. This is definitely a black metal-ish album. I think after listening to expanding my own personal subgenre horizons a little bit, I think it might fall under black and roll or whatever, but it's just some good metal, man. You're hearing a little bit of it now under me talk. I'll have a little bit clip of it after. But yeah, if you want a free download code from Bandcamp for this album, all you got to do is contact me in any way, shape, or form. So, email comicscoffeemetal@gmail.com, hit me up on Twitter @DonCardenasArt or @ComicsCoffeeMetal, CMX Coffee Metal, and yeah, I'll send you the download link and the code, and it's all yours. That's it. super easy. Free music, free awesome music. You can't lose. For music recommendation this week, I am going with Sarcoma, the second release from the band ALLUVIAL. ALLUVIAL originally started as an instrumental band from awesome guitar players Wes Houch and Keith Merrow, and they had a really great instrumental release a few years back, and they've kind of made some changes. Now it's just Wes in the band with Kevin Moeller on vocals, Tim Walker on bass, and Matt Palazzo on drums. And it is, Keith Merrill's an amazing guitar player and is, attached to so many awesome projects. And Wes is certainly no slouch himself. And this, so the change it's kind of a drastic one, going from an instrumental band to a band with vocals, but it really works. I think I found my favorite subgenre of metal or death metal, and that's, I guess, atmospheric death metal, because that's what they're kind of labeling themselves as, and I am really all into it. I really like the combination of just other instrumentation, not afraid to add a little electronic here, a little orchestra here, using guitars as textures, but also making sure the big primary rhythm components, and not to mention Wes Houch just being an absolutely killer lead guitar player. There's a ton of great solos in here, which is kind of different from a lot of the more atmospheric death metal stuff I've been listening to. That stuff tends to focus more on just the textures and just the rhythms and changing things up and some breakdowns and stuff like that. But ALLUVIAL throws in some good old-fashioned shredding, and it's very welcome. It feels like enough of a breath of fresh air into something. Even though shredding is very common in metal itself, with this particular subgenre, it really is something different and very welcome. And I said a lot about Wes Houch, but the rest of the band does a really great job. It's just a fantastic sounding album. There's a lot of variety in the songs. There is an instrumental song, a really great one, called Sugar Paper towards the end. There's a lot of just times they slow things down, they just kind of vibe on some chords and then they get right into like beating you with a sack of riffs. But this is definitely becoming my biggest type of jam to go with. And if you've been listening to the show for a while, I have a bad habit, or not necessarily a bad habit, I have a habit of picking the first song as my favorite track off a lot of these albums. But once again, I'm keeping the streak broken. It is not. My favorite song off of this album right now is the 7th track, actually, Sleepers Become Giants. It kind of, it's a great vibe, and it's got some great heavy parts, but just some almost kind of chill parts in there as well. This is kind of a pretty good song to do some weightlifting to, and the whole album is a great album to do some weightlifting to, because it pummels you when you need to be pummeled, and it kind of sets back when it needs to set back. So yeah, Sarcoma by ALLUVIAL, highly recommend. And here's a taste of my favorite track, Sleepers Become Giants. So, on the topic of amazing guitar players, let's talk about my guest, the super cool Max Carlisle of the GUITARMAX YouTube channel. Max's channel has been one of my favorites for a long time. He has a great sense of humor. It's very, we kind of bring it up a little bit in the show, but it's very dry. It's very up my alley. And after recording and this past week, he dropped a video about a guitar that he would call us a James Bond guitar, and the opening to that video is just hilarious. Max is a really cool dude, and he does a lot of cool stuff with budget gear, and shows you that a great guitar isn't as expensive as you think it needs to be. And on top of that, he's just an awesome player. So it's always cool to hear him rip out some awesome solos and stuff like that. For the comic fans out there, if you're seeing the image card, I neglected to bring this up to him, but Max, if you're listening, Max definitely is the spitting image of the death metal Superman from the DC Comics event from last year. So yeah, Max, look that up. You got some great cosplay in the future. Some real easy cosplay for you. But yeah, Max was awesome. I was incredibly grateful he came on. He's a very busy dude. He's got a very successful channel. And yeah, I really enjoyed talking to him, and I can't wait to bother him to come on the show again. It was a really, really fun chat. All right, let's get to it. So, of all the metal YouTube content creators I've been fortunate enough to interview lately, your channel has been the one I've watched the longest. I can't remember when I started. I know it was a few years ago, and around the time I started watching metal stuff on YouTube, and I've always really appreciated your attitude with your video. You seem very calm, reassuring, and measured. Review like budget equipment, which is right up my alley. And you also have a bit of fun with your. I really appreciate that. And there's you're got your toes into so many things. Becoming recently a pilot, doing YouTube, metal, photography, all these amazing things. Before we get into any of that, Max Carlisle, I ask you, comics, coffee, metal, what are you digging right now?
Well, so you mentioned real quick there that I'm a new pilot fairly recently, last year. And so I'm on a big aviation kick, and I've been going back and reading a bunch of books, especially from kind of the early times in aviation, in particular the 1920s. And along the lines of comics, I'm a big fan of the Enemy Ace comics.
Oh, nice,
which
classic.
Is Hans von Hammer, and most of them are set in World War I, although there's a few that are set later on. And I've really been digging that stuff. They're very dark, to be honest. They're but there's something about that that's a little more thrilling, a little more gripping to it that I like.
That's awesome. Yeah, the older comics, people don't realize, they were very adult. People mostly associated with the more kid type fare, but there's a lot of more adult oriented stuff in those comics. Like, millions of people read comics back in the day, and in the 40s and the 50s and 60s, and it's often remembered as, oh, it's the kids thing, but no, tons of soldiers and grown people were reading these things, romance comics, war comics, horror comics. And it wasn't until the whole Frederick Wertham thing and the seduction of the innocent and all that, where comics came under fire, that was it really kind of, I think, pigeonholed to be a kid's thing. So it's really cool to hear that it wasn't an answer I was expecting from you about the enemy A stuff, and now it makes total sense.
Well, yeah, I mean, you make a really good point there, and I think that, I mean, you know, there's always been blood and guts and slasher type stuff, but to me, those comics, like the enemy A stuff, the fact that they can kind of be seen as like historical fiction, in that they're set among real events and so forth, but at the same time, it's not just that they're graphic, pardon the pun, right? But it's not just that, but it's that the concepts they deal with are very, very adult. And I mean, I think those two things combined make it. I mean, it's just sort of a coincidence that it's done in a graphic format.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's some heavy stuff for sure, and those are some definitely classic stuff. And it's not necessarily was in my wheelhouse or anything like that, but I definitely know the history and the weight that those comics brought to the industry, and the respect that they're due. So it's great to hear that people are still enjoying them and going back, especially since it ties into your love of aviation.
The other stuff I'm really into these. I mean, I've been into this for a while, but I really love old pulp novels, and in particular, I love the old Doc Savage books from the 30s.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's been
yeah. I mean, there's tons of them, and to be, I mean, they have a very maybe predictable isn't the right word, but they're very formulaic. But I think there's a comfort and familiarity or something like that, and when you go back, I mean, like 20% of the book of the text is dedicated to talking about how great Doc Savage is, and his gang and that kind of stuff, which is hilarious. But and the stories, sometimes you can predict what's going to happen next and that kind of stuff. But it's a bit of a guilty pleasure for me.
Yeah, there's been a ton of great takes on Doc Savage with comics too, and if you're into the kind of pulpy stuff, I have some recommendations then.
Yeah, please.
There's an amazing series called Black Sad, where it's very much the hard-boiled pulp detective type of noirish type of thing, but it's all anthropomorphic characters. So it's like but it's very serious. It's very adult, but it's also like drawn in this like very detailed early, like if you would see some of these images, it's like it would be something like from early Disney stuff, just these ultra detailed backgrounds and these characters, but it's this real heavy, real serious detective kind of stuff, and it's such a cool take on that. If you like that kind of more pulpy stuff.
Black Sad, you said.
Black Sad, yeah, one word.
Okay, yeah, I'll look that up. That sounds really good. And
then there's a series of novels from the character Parker. I'm not so familiar with this, but I know there's kind of that detective noirish stuff. But it's from this creator, may he rest in peace, Darwin Cook. And it's another one of those series where it's got that pulpy feel.
Okay, well,
and it's got
I'll look up that too.
That just kind of like throwback, classic kind of style, and they are often lauded as, like the high points of that type of stuff. So yeah,
okay.
But yeah, I can personally vouch for, I'm looking over my bookshelf right now. The Black Sad stuff is amazing. It is really, really excellent stuff. So, if you get a chance, I hope, I'll definitely say check that out, because it's really cool.
Okay, cool. Yeah, excellent. I'll put that on my list. That sounds like really good stuff.
Yeah.
The other thing, you asked about at the beginning there, I'm not much of a coffee drinker, to be honest, but I am a tea drinker.
Okay.
And I like sort of classic British teas. I've got some Yorkshire Gold here, in particular, Taylor's of Harrington. And so like a strong black tea is pretty much what I like. I feel like it lasts a little bit. It's lasts a little longer than coffee, but it doesn't have quite the peak to it.
Okay. Yeah, I was a pretty heavy tea drinker myself before I fell into the mistress arms of coffee. But yeah, it's you know, I've mentioned this before on the show for listeners, and I kind of need to stop drinking so much coffee as I'm getting a little older. You know, it's having its effects towards the end of the day. You know, as much as I love it, you know, once you get that third cup in you and you start getting some heartburn, you're like, you know, this is what's giving me it. I better stop.
Oh, everybody says that. You're not going to stop. Yeah,
no.
Everybody says.
Well, I'm not going to stop, but I should probably cut back a little bit. Also, you know, it's getting to be summer now, so you know, drinking a hot cup of coffee like at 6 o'clock at night is probably not going to be in the cards. It's a little less appetizing.
That's what ice is for, right?
There you go. Get the iced coffee.
Yeah.
See, that's where to get me. That's where to get you. Make you stay.
You know, the other thing I should say, you know, during your lead in there, I mean, you know, thanks a ton for having me on the podcast, and it's really, you know, it's cool to talk to somebody who's been watching the channel for a long time, because I unlike some other people, I actually enjoy reading my comments section on the on the videos, and there are people in there who, you know, there are basically names that I recognize that I've seen for years. And, you know, I enjoy reading their comments. But, you know, then obviously every time I put out a new video, I'm hoping I can reach new people. So, you know, there's a really wide mix of how long people have been watching my videos on there. So, but it's great to talk to somebody who's been watching it for a while.
Yeah. If I had to try to pinpoint it, I think I first heard of your channel because another YouTuber was talking about how you had to change the name. Because you had 3 X's with Max, and like YouTube didn't like that or something. So I'm like, who? I'm like, and they were like talking about how BS that was or whatever, and how he had a great channel. So I'm like, oh, let me look this up. And then I found out. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. So I know that was a few years ago, and I'm terrible at commenting on people's YouTube videos because I watch, you know, YouTube's probably my main source of TV. When I'm not stuck watching something the kids want to watch, but it's, you know, I mean to, like, you know, comment on there and do all that, but, you know, I just enjoy watching it, you know, so I've been trying to be more participatory to that and give the thumbs up and do the, you know, do the comments so that it increases the algorithm numbers or whatever, you know, mojo it does.
Yeah, that's right. It helps video interaction, you know, whether it's comments or thumbs up or even thumbs down helps, actually. It's kind of a funny thing. Yeah.
It's interaction. Well, it's interaction. Yeah.
Yeah. Any kind of interaction. Yeah. No, the name thing was kind of funny. And to be honest, you know, it wasn't like anybody forced me to change the name. It was just, there was another YouTuber, and I think the guy who you're referring to was somebody else, but Davidas, who's another YouTuber who does these great, you know, he'll do like public performances and stuff like that, and improvisations and stuff. And he actually sent me a message, and he said, "Hey man, you know, you might want to consider changing your name because you know, the spelling, it might get flagged and this kind of thing." So he suggested it, and I thought about it for a while, and I did a little research on it. I was like, well, you know, the channel's doing okay, but you know, anything like that I could do to, you know, help the channel grow and so forth. And the other part of it too was, you know, at that point I wanted to have a little bit more of like a clear brand, if that makes sense. So, you know, a name that sort of is just a little bit more straightforward and, you know, like, you know, so people don't think I'm, you know, reviewing porn videos or something like that. And so, yeah, so that's when I ended up just changing it to GUITARMAX. But yeah, that was a few years ago now.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember who was mentioned, because they mentioned GUITARMAX was the new name. So that's why I'm like, oh, okay. So maybe they assumed that's what happened because the name changed or whatever. Was it Phil McKnight? I don't know. I've watched so many YouTubers, and some have come and gone and all that, but regardless of how, I'm glad I found your channel because it's a great channel, and GUITARMAX is the perfect name for it. So,
good.
You know,
Thank you.
You know, it's you know, it's kind of nice to see, because there's a lot of the reviewers I watch and guitar people I watch, everyone kind of reviews all the cheap guitars sometimes and all that, but you've managed to, you know, go beyond just the popular ones that are going around, stuff like the Wolf stuff and the course, the name's gonna blank on me. Oh, what is it?
Let's see, the Firefly, maybe.
The Fireflies definitely, and I've had, you know, my buddy and I have definitely like shared your videos, like, hey, check out this one, check out this one. I think he's actually bought a couple Fireflies.
Oh, good,
because of that too. But there's another one. I think they're built overseas and they come over, and then they're like set up and all that. And I'm trying to remember the name. It's like a 2 or 3 word name, and I feel so ridiculous.
Well, there's the Harley Benton brand from Germany.
No, not Harley Benton. Oh, jeez.
Let's see.
There's
Is it the all-in-one guitars?
Yes, all-in-one.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, that's the same as the Wolf.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the same as the Wolf brand. Yeah, that's just they have kind of their own. They're trying to establish their name as more of a guitar brand rather than a shop, which is what it has been in the past. But no, those are awesome guitars. I mean, you know, I try to, you know, I'm a big believer in giving people what they want, you know, and you know, the first few videos I did were just kind of, you know, I was just reviewing just sort of whatever, you know, I just happened to own such and such. I'm like, here's a review. Let's check it out, this kind of thing. And as I built up my back catalog of videos, you know, I just try to analyze that stuff. I'm like, you know, what do people respond to and what do people seem to want to see more of? And it was really pretty clear that people wanted good, you know, they didn't really care about the brand name. They just wanted something that was good quality. And if it's affordable, that's even better. So I've really tried to stick to that. You know, obviously I do other videos, you know, other topics here and there, but I've really tried to kind of narrow in on that stuff. But yeah, like what you're saying, you know, when you go on YouTube and there are 30 guitar channels reviewing a Galeri guitar or a Donner or something like that, it's like, okay, let's try and find something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I say this agreeing as I look over to my Galeri telly.
Well, hey, it worked then.
Well, you know, I've said this before on the show, but I think I've been lucky enough to kind of curate my YouTube subscription feed so that even though it's the same product people are reviewing, it's different perspectives, you know, enough different perspectives. So if I do watch the video, it's going to be a little different than the last one I watched, and so on and so forth. So, but yeah, there's definitely a huge, I tell this to anyone who's like starting out or whatever, like there's no reason not to like start off with like a really decent instrument now. It's so cheap now. Like you know, back when I started, you know, you know, I'm sure back when you started, it was like, you know, mile high action for whatever your first guitar was, you know, frets that were pretty much, you might as well have been razor wire, and, you know, a neck that, you know, tuners that wouldn't stay in tune if you know, super glued them shut or whatever. But now it's like, you can get a really decent player for not a lot of money. And, you know, I don't know if that's kind of coincided with the kind of seeming upswing of really talented young people playing guitar now. I'm sure YouTube and tutorials and, you know, people breaking things down more visually for people than just searching out tabs and and all that, like a lot of us had to do back in the day, helps out with that. But I think also just having something that's not like literally painful to play as soon as you start playing is a huge benefit to new people.
I think a huge part of it, I mean, I think well, for one thing, which is just kind of amazing to me, is that it's actually getting hard to find a bad instrument these days. Like, you really have to look through a bunch of guitars, like I'm talking new guitars, to find one that really sucks. You know, most of them are at least mediocre. And as far as, you know, people playing better, I think the way that the instruments contribute to that is, you know, if you're starting out, you know, you don't have your calluses on your fingertips and so forth. And it's like, you really have to be motivated to stick with it. And getting through that first few months phase is really the tricky part when people are starting out. And so if you have a bad guitar on top of all of the other negativity that comes from struggling in the beginning, then it's a recipe for quitting, right?
Yeah.
But if you have a guitar that's somewhat easy to play, or at least not, worse than it needs to be, that eliminates that sort of that element of frustration, or at least some of it, I think. So I think it's not so much that it makes the learning process easier, but I think it makes it easier for people to want to learn more on guitar.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's one thing when you're trying to learn, an A chord, and you strum it and it sounds all crappy and buzzy and kind of out of tune, and you're like, I'm not doing this right. I'm not picking this up. And it's like, no, you just had shitty frets.
Right,
it's and things you don't know. So having so many of those, unknown or just like, unforeseen barriers to just have that tiny little bit of success and move forward. It's a lot like I see with digital art now and comics and creators. There's so many tools out there now to kind of get you to a level to where you're like, oh, this doesn't look, I'm kind of new and this doesn't look terrible. Just like with recording music now, if you can just strum a chord on a beat, if you got, a DAW and a drum sampler or whatever, like you can kind of put together a song pretty easy. It sounds like a song, and it doesn't, it's not, it's very rewarding. And, there's a lot easier path to getting that carrot on the stick to progress and all that, which I think is great, because I think the more people out there creating things, the more awesome creations we have to consume ourselves and then ingest and, inspire us to do our own things. So,
yeah, and I think also in a way it increases the purity of the art, if that makes sense. When you get rid of technical hurdles and you don't have to work around technical problems, or it's like, well, I wish I could do this, but that piece of equipment doesn't work or something like that. When you can get rid of all those problems, then I think it's just the creator and their ideas, and then it just comes down to that. And you can see the artist's true potential more easily, I think.
That's a really great point. And you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but one of the video series that you do that I really enjoy is the Positive Metal Outlook, where you kind of put forth a positive video and kind of talk about these subjects. What was there an impetus for kind of like starting that series, or was it just like something you just kind of came across one day, and is it being received well? It seems like it is, but from your perspective, do you feel like it's doing what you wanted it to do?
Yeah, well, it is doing what I wanted it to do, and they are received well. They're not my most popular videos, but they are kind of in the middle, which I think for a video like that, where I'm just sitting there talking about something, I think that's pretty good. As far as why I did those videos, I'm just naturally a very positive person, and on top of that, things have just kind of, by accident or otherwise, things have gone pretty well for me, just in life in general, and I don't have any, health problems or anything like that. So I just tend to always see a silver lining in things and that kind of stuff. But as I've gotten older and met more people and so forth, I've come to realize that not everyone is like that. And maybe even these days, maybe even most people are not like that. And so when I started making those videos, it was in 2020, and a lot of people were having a lot of different problems, a lot of economic problems and so forth. And I did one video, and then at the end of the video, I said, hey, do you guys want me to do more of these? Is this helpful? That kind of thing. And I got a huge, overwhelmingly positive response to that first video. And so I kind of, when I did the first video, I didn't realize how much of a desire for that stuff was out there. And so, since then I'm just, okay, I'm going to keep doing more of those videos. And, I don't do them on any sort of schedule. It's just kind of whenever I think of something to say, or, something is timely or something like that, then I put one of those videos out. But they're the kinds of videos where even if I put out a video and it doesn't do really well in terms of views or something like that, or maybe it's a topic that not that many people are interested in, the people who do like the video absolutely love the videos. So it's sometimes it's a small response, but it's a very passionate response. And I'm just as happy with that than if I got, 1 million views, but people were kind of about it. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
No, that makes perfect sense. And, I kind of wanted to comment on it. You seem like a very, naturally, like authentically positive person, and just kind of, just wanting to, the vibe I always get from your videos is like, you're not trying to sell me anything. You're not trying to, make content to get the revenue and push this and push that. You're like, no, man, I love guitars. Here's some cool, cheap guitars. Like, you're going to love these too. And it comes off, like I said, very authentically, very, naturally. And so when you started doing those, I was like, it seemed like a natural progression. And I'm glad, that you're getting a great response, and they're doing well enough for you to be like, okay, this is a worthwhile endeavor. Working in comics, it is mostly about those passionate few, right? That are like, no, I love what you're doing. Please keep doing it. Oh, I really enjoyed this, as opposed to, oh, this may have had, this story or whatever may have better reach or whatever, but I'm not getting any feedback on this. Like, I'm not getting that thing kind of like all, creative people kind of want, is that feedback where it's like, I really enjoyed this. Like, sure, we do it for ourselves and all that, but you also want to know that people are connecting to it.
Right.
So it's not unexpected to hear that from you, based on the vibe I get from your videos and all that. But it is nice and reassuring to hear that that's a big factor for you in these things. So.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, and I'm trying to think of the right words for this, but sometimes at this point in my life, I mean, YouTube is my full-time job, and I mean, if something I think about often is if someone had gone back in time when I was 15 and talked to me and said, hey, 20 years from now, you are going to make videos on this thing called the internet, and a bunch of people are going to watch them, and you basically get to play a whole bunch of different guitars. You play heavy metal, you do heavy metal solos, and companies want you to play their guitar, and that's what you do. That's your job. If somebody had come back in time and told me that when I was 15, I would have been thrilled, right? I mean, that's like, it's a dream come true in a lot of ways, and I try to think about that often and think about that a lot. And even when, there are still things in my life that I look at as challenges, whether it's some long-term goal that I'm working towards or whatever. And maybe I'm frustrated about it because I'm not getting there quick enough or something like that, or I feel like I'm not making the progress I want to. I still get frustrated about things, but I try to think about things like that perspective. I try to think about that often. And I'm not saying that I'm the most grounded person in the world, but I try to be. And it's just, if I can think about that and feel like that, and then if I can give a little bit of that positivity to my audience, I think it's just, I mean, and then that makes me happy also, to hear when people are responding that way to things. It cheers people up, or there's like, oh, I didn't think about that, or hey, thanks for putting out these videos. I mean, it's just a win for everybody, I think.
That's awesome. And I think this kind of leads into the first question I have from Twitter, and that is from John. He wants to know, how do you balance all the cool things you do? Because you do a lot of cool things, and there's only so many hours in a day. So, Are you a very regimented person in terms of schedule and things like that?
Well, I will say that time management is a big focus of my life. Yeah, well, I'll say this, like for a long time, I've juggled a bunch of different things in my life, and they haven't always been the same things, but I've just kind of done that for a long time, because obviously before my YouTube channel got big enough, I was working day jobs, and sometimes I would be playing in bands, and sometimes I'd be on tour, and I would be, still trying to get my workouts in, when I'm on tour and things like that. And there have been times where I've been taking online classes or something like that and trying to balance that with everything else in my life. And I'm married, so I have, I want to spend time with my wife and our pets and that kind of stuff. Time management is something that I think about a lot. And I can give you specific things. There's a few things I do that really help with that. One is that I use the Google Calendar, and I make appointments for all of the things, like as if I had an appointment with somebody else, but it's usually just something I'm doing myself. And I make appointments on my calendar because otherwise I would just forget a lot of things. And I keep to-do lists, and I have I prioritize things on my lists, like if I only get one thing done today, what does it need to be, and that kind of stuff. I try to think a lot about things that are of immediate concern versus things that are more like longer term concerns, that kind of stuff. But I think, and to be honest, I still waste time. I still think, I still sleep in sometimes, and I'll get stuck like, I'll watch probably too much YouTube, and so I could be better about it, but yeah. And also to be totally honest, there's probably 4 or 5 years ago, I was better at it than I am now. I think I've actually slacked off a little bit. Maybe I've gotten a little lazy.
I think a little ebb and flow is natural to these types of things. You can't be, scheduled to death all the time, otherwise you'll burn out. So it's important to waste a little time here and there.
Yeah.
It's like one of those, little shower thought things. Like if you enjoyed wasting your time, was it truly wasted?
Right. Sure. Yeah. That's valid.
So no, that's awesome. I will say though, out of, all the, the vast amount of metal subgenres, the type of metal that you're into and you play isn't the one I'm the most versed in.
Sure,
I tend towards more either like the more modern style or the more groove metal Pantera-esque stuff, or more like the doomy Sabbath stuff. I don't want to call it hair or glam or anything like that, because those are used almost as like a insult at times, those styles, which I'm not wanting to insult any style at all. But definitely that more shreddy, the guitar focused stuff is something that I've been trying to get myself into, because I'm working on a comic project where the main characters are in a band that are taking their influence kind of from that. So I'm like, I want to verse myself a little bit more. So you recently had a video where you talked about this band called Warrior.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you know what? I need to start checking out some of these bands. Here's a recommendation right here. Let me go check that out. And I'm really digging it. I think my tastes have adjusted enough to where I can, really appreciate that stuff. I think for a long time, even with me getting more into like the deathier, growlier stuff, like that took time. That took a lot of time for me to get used to that kind of stuff and all that. So yeah, it's nice to kind of like, oh, this is actually, really, really talented people and, excellent singers. And they actually had an album which one was it? I think it was the album they released in 2000. It was a different singer than the usual one, though. I had to double check. But it was in the early 2000s. They had a war, and I'm like, I'm really digging this one because it was a bit more darker toned, I guess. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit more at my alley. But yeah, so in terms of is that kind of like your? I'm running in circles, trying to get to the point. Is that your main kind of like go-to for style of metal, or do you just kind of really just is that just the one you enjoy playing the most, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, you bring up so many interesting points there, but I mean, as far as your question, I mean, you probably heavy metal that leans power metal is where I'm really at home at, so that can be anything from the old new wave of British heavy metal bands and so forth, to I love a lot of the modern power metal bands, mostly European bands, like a lot of the what I would call classic power metal bands like Halloween or Gamma Ray. Bands like that. I mean, that stuff, I can pretty much listen to that all day long, because to me, that's kind of the sweet spot between the older heavy metal bands and then the new kind of more polished power metal that's exists from like the 2000s forward, I guess. Yeah, so it's but I mean there are the thing that really stands out to me about your question is we get into this old debate about what is metal, and what qualifies as metal, and are there certain ingredients that have to be there, and that kind of stuff. And it's like, well, like we can, is like Rainbow's Night. Is that? It's like, well, maybe it's folk metal, but there's like flutes and stuff in it, that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, and so it's there are some metal songs where if they come on, I'll turn them off. Like I don't, I don't like it all, right? But I try to give everything a fair shake. But of course, there's always going to be stuff that I gravitate towards. And again, sort of those kind of classic power metal bands is where I'm really at home. Primal Fear, Ralph Sheepers. I love any stuff that he's done. Iron Savior. And I love cheesy lyrics. I will proudly admit that, like any band where you put it on and there's a narrator, and then the elves found that the cave was abandoned, anytime you put something on and you get like that, it's like, oh, I'm a total sucker for that stuff, So, awesome. And yeah, like I mentioned, Iron Savior, all the lyrics are about, the sun exploded, and we have to get on the spaceship, to escape. It's just like, I mean, I guess, but yeah, I mean, I think that goes along with, I like these old, trashy, pulpy, like 1930s novels. I think that kind of goes hand in hand in a weird way.
Yeah, I think when metal takes it, like metal can. Well, just to go back a little bit, I've stated many times on this show, metal is less a genre than a medium, to be honest. There you can look at, like you brought up Rainbow. That can be folk metal. You can bring up, the gentiest genters in the planet. Yeah, that's metal. Then you can bring up stuff like Baby Metal or Amaranth or Nightwish or even your something like Gamma Ray or Gamma Bomb or
right.
Just all, it's like you have such a huge swath of just different styles, but still all metal. And while metal can definitely tackle heavy themes and be serious and be aggressive and all that, some of the best metal is also the metal. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It's all done for fun, and it's all done for, to tell a story. You brought up like the narrator stuff and all that, and it made me chuckle because there was a song from this band called Dreamtale that I would use to kind of like be my warm up for my runs. and it's like this epic build up instrumental thing. But then there's this, it quiets down to a quiet part, and it's, I forget the exact wordings, but it's like, and he sat upon a rock, and like I was just like listening to it one day in the car because it came up on shuffle. My wife's like, "What is this?" She's like, and it's just more like she's not used to me listening to like that. It's usually something more aggressive. If I'm like, "Oh, this is on my running mix" or whatever, I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know, I just really liked it." So no, I get the appreciation of the cheese and the stuff like that, because it's it's one of the cool things about metal is it could be that thing you need as your outlet for aggression and anger or sadness and all that. But then also it's like, I kind of want to have some fun, Right. I can find some metal that'll do that. A band for me that does that is Sabbath.
Okay.
And, they're serious. They talk about war or whatever, but they're not, had I not seen them in concert, I probably would not have been a fan of them. Because I'm like, right. I like the music, it's good, but I'm like, I don't know, singing about war and stuff. But then seeing them on stage and they're just having fun and just joking around with everybody and just smiles on their face throughout the whole thing. It's like, I genuinely like these people as like people, and performers. So it's like listening to the songs now, I have that information in my brain when I'm listening to it. So it's like, okay, I'm a little more endeared to it now because I know it's all done. It's not like a history lesson, but it's like, no, history's cool. Some messed up stuff's happened in history. Let's do some metal about it.
Oh yeah, I mean, and it's funny you mentioned them. I mean, that's a band that has really grown on me. Like when I first heard them, I was like, this is kind of whatever, But then I listened to more of it, and it's like they've got one song. It's like Panzerkampf or something. It's about like tanks or something.
yeah.
Oh, it's such a good tune, man. It's a great driving song when you're in traffic.
Yeah, they are great driving music. That is definitely if you're just like going fast or doing something fast, they are great to put on.
Yeah.
Well, this brings me up to the second question we have from the username, which I absolutely love, Chug Chug Chugger. Asks, what's the heaviest song you've ever heard?
The heaviest song I've ever heard. Oh, geez.
That's such an open-ended question. Sorry to drop that. I think it's like, what, like heavy, like just like low and dirty, or just like heavy in terms of material?
What do they mean by
like,
heavy, right? What do they mean by heavy? Like,
I would assume probably like the nastiest riffs, the most heavy metal song you probably, would. If someone's like, what's the most heavy metal song you've ever heard? Like, what is that for you? Which I'm sure would change by the hour if you're like me at all.
I think if I just have to pick one off the top of my head, I'm gonna say "Dawn of Battle" by Manowar. Yeah, it's from that's an EP that they did. It's not one of their more well-known songs, but definitely a heavy one.
Awesome. So is there an album or anything that you've been giving a lot of spins to lately? Something that new that's caught your eye, or?
Well, it's funny you mentioned Black Sabbath earlier, and I've actually been listening to Headless Cross a lot lately.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I kind of had overlooked the Tony Martin albums for a long time, and I mean I'd heard like a few songs, but never the entire Headless Cross album. And I got that recently, and I'm really, really enjoying that one. And that's got some heavy songs on it.
Yeah, I have to give that one a fair shake because I'm an Ozzy Sabbath guy, and last year I went back and I'm like, all respect given to Dio. I like Dio. I'm like, I just never gel with the Dio Sabbath stuff. Right. Like, let me go back and give this like a fair shake. And I ended up liking a lot more than I expected to. And like the last album they did when they were billed as Heaven and Hell and not Sabbath, but still Sabbath. Like that's an amazing album. Like that's like one of my favorite. I still classify it as a Black Sabbath album. I'm like, that's one of my favorite Black Sabbath albums. Like, period.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I kind of skipped over the the Tony Martin stuff. But I should go back and give that its due too, because it's I've heard some of the tunes on there, and they actually sound really interesting and cool and heavy, like you said.
Yeah. They're yeah, and it's funny because obviously those, like the Tony Martin albums, those are in the late '80s, and in the late '80s is generally associated as like, well, that's the go-to time for heavy metal, right? There's so many great metal albums, but not so much for Black Sabbath, right? You always, when you think of Sabbath, you think of the earlier albums, So it's I think it's an overlooked era for the band.
Yeah, that is a great point to bring up, where it's like arguably one of the most influential heavy metal bands of all time. Like during the prime metal time was this kind of like not really out there and doing stuff and getting those dues. Kind of an offshoot from that, I really enjoy the Iommi Hughes collaborations.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
They put one out back in the Wild West of file sharing. I'd come across the demos, I guess, because it wasn't formally released at that point. I'm like, wow, this is really good. And then once they formally released it, I was able to pick it up in through respectful means. Right. But yeah, that was like an era where I'm like, oh wow, that's really good. And then I realized that was it Seventh Star that Hughes sang on? I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
But yeah, that's really good stuff. But so yeah, okay. Old Black Sabbath, cool. Is there like if you could pick like one band that people don't know from that era, that 80s era, that's never got the respect due, what would that be, you think?
Maybe Crimson Glory.
Crimson Glory? Okay.
Yeah, like the first self-titled album was their first album, and then Transcendence was the second album. Those two albums are phenomenal.
And and I asked this, selfishly, because I'm like I said, I'm trying to like get into that spirit, catch that vibe from that kind of stuff. So this is for my own personal research at this point, where I'm like, okay, I need to check this out, because one of the cool things about doing this show is I think I know a lot about metal, and I do. I know a lot of genres and bands, but it's still just the tip of the iceberg, because without fail, pretty much every time someone comes on and talks about something new they're digging, I've never heard of this band. I've never heard, be it a death metal band or a dungeon synth band or a doom metal band or whatever. And it's just like, oh, okay. So I'm like constantly taking notes and trying to expand my metal vocabulary, as it were. So, I appreciate you sharing that. Crimson Glory. Okay. Oh, that's a great name too.
Yeah, great. Yeah, great band. They had the third album, they kind of went a little like in the hair metal direction, and there were some good songs, but I think it was a little. It's such a typical comment to make, but it's like, oh, it's too commercial, man, But yeah, the first two albums are really just dynamite, like sort of 80s power metal. Like there's a few kind of speed metal tracks on there, really great vocals, great guitar work. But it has that band has a very distinctive sound. Very, they don't sound like they're copying any other band or anything like that. Yeah, so I highly recommend the first two Crimson Glory albums. Yeah,
awesome.
And there is, I think it's their fourth album. So the singer died, I believe, in the he died in the 2000s, and they did a fourth album with a different singer who did a pretty good job. I mean, a lot, it was one of these things where the band was, the singer was really, it was, standout vocals in the band. And I think so a lot of people were very skeptical as to if they could get somebody who could fill those shoes. But the guy on the fourth album, he really did a good job. So, but yeah, to be honest, you can skip the third album.
I will make that note. So we've touched a lot on the metal and all that, and but one thing that does also come to mind a lot whenever I see your channel and all that is that you do have like a kind of a, I won't say dry sense of humor, but you play everything very straight. And like one of the things I always loved the most was when you were doing the guitar unboxings and you were like pulling out the sword, the broadsword and the mail, and then Sir Guitars a lot and all that. What was the kind of thought behind that? Were you just like, I just want to have some fun. I got these cool medieval things hanging around. Let's try this.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, as far as the dry sense of humor, I've tried putting more comedy in my stuff, but I have something about my delivery just doesn't work. And in particular, I have the problem where I'll tell a joke and half the audience doesn't know that I'm joking. Like they just think I'm nuts, right? And so I to be honest, I kind of gave up on that style of humor, but I can usually do sort of sarcastic kind of parody, dry humor. I can usually pull that off. So yeah, with the unboxing stuff, that was a funny thing because it just kind of grew out of nothing. And like at some point, I forget what I used first, if I used the helmet first or the sword first. I think it was the sword. And, I have a sword in my closet that I've had there for years, like most people.
Yeah.
And I think I was like, I don't know, some power metal thing. I'm like, I talk about power metal a lot and, I play that style. I'm like, so of course I should use a sword to open this box. It just seems natural. And I think I did that first. And then, people, they either love it or hate it, but fortunately more love than hate. And so I'm like, okay, well, let's keep going in this direction. And yeah, and then it was like every time I would do a new video, I would try to add something to it. Then I got the gauntlets, and then I got a helmet, and then I actually got a different helmet because there's another guy on YouTube who has the first helmet, and I didn't want to look exactly like that guy. So it's a funny problem to have, but yeah, so that just grew. And then eventually, I think there was one video I did where I unboxed a guitar with in the helmet and the gloves and the whole thing. And then, once I get it out of the box, I did the rest of the video pretty standard. But I think the company that made the guitar sent me an email, and they didn't like, they really didn't like the unboxing portion of the video. And they're like, can you give us, just like, can you like tell people that they can skip ahead, or something like that. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe I can't do this every single time or something. So at that point I thought about, okay, well, I should have a different character. It's not going to be me like putting on the helmet and taking it off. It's like, I'm going to have this other person who wears all this stuff. And so that's kind of where it's led to now. And so now, if it's a situation where I don't care what the company thinks, or I just have like absolutely no connection, then I'll be like, okay, this is a perfect opportunity for Sir Guitars a lot to do this, but that way it gives me a little more flexibility to it too. And then I can keep going with that kind of dry humor where I'm just like, hey, Sir Guitars a lot beat me to this, but fortunately he's going to let me borrow this, that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, I remember when you first started doing that, and some people who didn't like it, like I remember reading some of those comments, and I'm like, they really didn't like it. But it was also like, obviously the comments were not directed towards me, so I could take it this way. But it was almost humorous in how much they did not like it. This is like, you really getting bent out of shape about this. It's like,
oh yeah, and what a thing to get upset about,
like,
right?
It's just like. You know this is a metal channel, right? Like
Did you see the video with the puppet?
the puppet. Oh, I saw.
Well, after the first few videos where I had the helmet on and that kind of stuff, because I read the comments and I get a kick out of them, especially the bad comments. I enjoy reading them, and so I'm like, okay, I'll do a different video. And so I did an unboxing video, and I start out by saying, I'm like, okay, guys, I'm not going to use the sword. It's just going to be a totally standard video, And then I said, but I'm going to have somebody help me with this. And so I have a puppet character that does the rest of the video with me, like instead of, putting the helmet on and that kind of stuff. So, so like, I know a lot of people don't like the sword, so I'm just going to do a standard video, this kind of thing. And then I have like a Muppets puppet on there.
It was a pedal, right?
Yeah, it was like a multi-effects pedal.
Okay. Yeah. I remember that, and I definitely was on board with the, like, in my head it was like kind of like, all right, you guys gonna complain about that? Well, here's something. Here's something else. What do you think about this? and it kind of goes back to the whole thing about metal. Like, you can't take yourself too seriously, because it's just, what's the point? If you can't have a little fun, yeah. If you can't open a guitar box with a sword, why are you going to bother, like, opening guitar boxes on video then? Like, what's the point? Like, if I was doing that, I would find something ridiculous to open the boxes with. It's just, it's all about fun. Like, who cares? It's a sharp implement to get the box open. So why not make it ridiculous and fun and thematically appropriate?
I have a great time doing it, and I consider myself an entertainer, right? And I want to put on a show for people, and so it's I'm gonna keep doing stuff like that. I've got all kinds of zany ideas that I can't wait to get out there.
Well, one person's opinion is, I think it's great. I chuckle. I get the dry sense of humor, and as you mentioned, there's times where it's half the people wouldn't be able to tell you're telling a joke. It's like, well, I like that kind of humor where it's like, oh, but also, I can understand why, you might, some stuff might be, come off certain way, just because, I've watched the channel for years. So I know your demeanor and your attitude and all that. And someone might just come across this as their first video, and they're like, what's with this guy?
Yeah, that's true. I do wonder about that. If the people who the first time they see me do a video, if it's like a Sir Guitars a Lot video or something, I wonder about that. Yeah.
It would, I think this day and age, it'd be hard for me to imagine someone not being like, all right, that was kind of cool, or that was pretty funny. That it's just, I don't know, but there's people who hate fun, I guess.
yeah, that's true.
Just get to, what are the frets made of?
Yeah. Well, that's something that I've really tried to just go in the opposite direction of that kind of snobby kind of stuff, because it's so unfortunately it's a very prevalent thing in the guitar community, and I think there are some guys who go on YouTube and they just want to, they want to review only high-end expensive stuff, and they want to tell you why this pedal that they paid $800 for is the best overdrive pedal, and it's way better than your piece of junk Boss or whatever, and this kind of thing. And it's like, I mean, first of all, most of the people who do that on YouTube don't last, because it doesn't land well with the audience, I think. But yeah, I never want music or guitar in particular, I never want it to be like an exclusive club or something like that. Like, whether somebody wants to be a professional musician or not, or they have some other job or career that they want to work towards, and they just want to be a musician in that they can sit down by themselves and play the instrument and be happy. I mean, I think it's always something that can add to somebody, playing an instrument is always something that can add to somebody's life. And it's a positive thing. It makes people happy. It gives them something that they can share with other people. And like any of that stuff where it's like, well, don't you wish you could have this, but you can't? Like, I really don't like that stuff. And, but yeah, I mean, fortunately, like I said, I think the people who try to do that stuff usually end up failing. And that just tells me that, that's not really what people want. People don't value that attitude.
Yeah. And there's even the ones that, if they do like mostly review higher end stuff or the more expensive stuff, one comes to mind is Music is Win, Tyler Larson. He does silly stuff in his videos all the time.
Yeah.
He's doing the sense of humor and all that. So even though he's showing that he's got what was his most recent thing, like a custom shop, a private stock PRS that is worth more than probably some people's cars. He's still got a sense of humor about it. He's still got it's not snobbery. It's just an appreciation of those things. So yeah, some of the gatekeepy kind of stuff, I think, and that's a problem with, I think, all types of creative things. It happens with art and comics. It happens with guitars and music and all that. It's just like, yeah, if you made a lot of great points where it's like, it's music is awesome, guitars are awesome. Like, why not want to share that and have more people involved in that and enjoy it and feel welcomed into that?
Yeah.
So we touch a ton on metal, a ton of guitar and all that. I do want to hear a little bit about your love of aviation, because you've like we mentioned before, you last year you become a fully fledged pilot. You have a second YouTube channel that's dedicated to that, Heavy Metal Horizons. And I think just today I saw you're doing parasailing now or paragliding, which is not for me. But it was really cool to be like, oh wow, you just kind of like go for it. So was aviation always a thing that you kind of just were drawn to, or was it something that you kind of developed over time?
Well, I mean, I'm glad you asked about it. It's something I like to talk about, but also the way I got into it, I think is it's maybe worth thinking about for some people. But real quick, paragliding, don't knock until you tried it, because it's not as of an adrenaline rush. It's not like a daredevil kind of thing. It's actually extremely relaxing. But anyway, we'll get to that in a second. But so aviation. So I have some family background in aviation. Both of my grandfathers were pilots. On my father's side, he was an Air Force pilot. On my mother's side, he was a private pilot. And I also had, some uncles who were military pilots. I currently have a cousin who's a Navy helicopter pilot. Like, he's a real badass dude. And when I was a kid with my dad, I would build model airplanes and model rockets. And so it was kind of in my family, and it was just kind of in the air a little bit. Terrible pun, in the air a little bit. But it was never something that I considered that I would do personally. And I think the reason is that most of the people that I knew that were pilots were in the military. And I didn't want to join the military. I didn't want to get shot. It seemed kind of dangerous, especially because, when you think of like the military that your grandfather was in, it's like, that's dangerous.
Yeah.
And so it was never really something that I thought it was cool. I was interested in it, but I never really gave it much thought as like, I'm going to do that someday. That wasn't a thing. And that was the situation until about 8 years ago. And I had a very strange job in the fine art business. I won't go into that, but it was very weird industry. the entire industry is based on the perception of value. But anyway, I won't go into it. But there was a guy that I would work with sometimes who worked at a big shipping company. And so when we would ship, like an expensive painting, I would work with this guy. And that guy was a pilot. He is a pilot. He's a private pilot. But it was like this guy had never been in the military. He played guitar. He had a pretty regular job. But, on the weekends, he had a plane and he would go flying. And that, meeting him and getting to know him, and he kind of told me about that. I was like, oh, wait a minute. Like, just a regular dude can do this, if they want to. And that kind of got the gears turning in my head and got me thinking about, like, okay, well, wait a minute. This is something I've always thought was cool, but I never really considered that I could do it because I felt like I didn't fit the profile or something. But then it was like, wait a second. No, maybe I could do this. And that went, years went by because, I was doing other things. And he took me out flying a few times, just flying around, local stuff in California. And I was like, oh man, this is really cool. And, there's all kinds of stuff you learn about when you become a pilot that is just, the general public is just not at all aware about. You don't think in 3 dimensions, when you're just driving around on the street. And so I started to learn about this stuff. And then at one point I did a thing called a discovery flight, which is basically something you do if you're thinking about doing pilot training, where you go with an instructor and they kind of show you some basic things and, kind of get you excited about it. And I did that and I was like, man, I really want to do this. But at that time I was still working a day job and, I couldn't commit the time to it and that kind of stuff. And then basically in 2019, my schedule had changed enough where, I was doing YouTube full time and I'm like, I can take a big chunk of like the middle of the day and now I can dedicate it to this. And so I started the training and just absolutely loved it. And, I finished my private pilot training, so I'm not a commercial pilot, but I'm a private pilot. I finished that last year. Had a great time, and I'm continuing to fly now, and I'm working on additional certifications and so forth because there's all these different little things that you kind of add on in terms of certification once you've gotten your initial license, and and then the paragliding thing. So the guy who was my primary flight instructor, he's one of these guys that kind of just makes everybody else look bad, in that he does. He's scuba, first of all, he's a flight instructor for his job, and he scuba dives and he goes skydiving and he rides horses and he goes paragliding and just does everything right. And he was like, hey man, you should try, actually, he was telling me about skydiving and I was like, well, that sounds kind of cool, but I don't know. And he's like, okay, we'll try paragliding first because it's like a much more relaxing version of skydiving. It's like skydiving only without the terror, right? And so I'm like, okay, well that sounds good. So then he basically talked me into trying the paragliding, and I did that yesterday actually, and I loved it. So, but yeah, we were talking about time management earlier, and we'll see. We'll see if I pursue that more or not. I just might not have the time for it, but I'm not gonna decide yet. I'm just gonna see where that goes. But yeah, at this point though, I love aviation and the pilot stuff, and it was kind of a very profound thing for me to do something that I always, I always kind of wanted to do it, but never considered that I could do it. Mm-hmm. And then for me to actually do that, it opens a lot of doors in your mind, I guess, in terms of like what you feel like you can do. But yeah, it all stemmed from this bizarre job I had in the art industry. And actually, just a quick side thing here. A big part of that was I met a lot of people who were very powerful in the industry and wealthy and well respected. And then I met these people and realized that they were complete idiots. And I thought, okay, well, wait a minute. If they can do that, that I could probably do something cool too. And so that was kind of the beginning of it, where I was like, well, wait a minute, maybe I could do things that I used to think I couldn't do, that kind of stuff. That's kind of a long-winded answer there.
No, it was perfect. And it's kind of awesome. Now you have this deeper connection to, members of your family, and, you've all been in the air and had those experiences that, piloting a ship, a plane and things like that. It's, it's something that's, available for a lot of people to go and do and learn and all that. Not, the actual percentage of people who have done it and do it is so small. So you're, just, it's cool that you were just like, well, I'm going to do it. And you did it. And, it's, you bring up the time management thing, but it's, it's also like finding experiences that enrich yourself and things like that. And kind of, not that, you could probably draw a direct line from, writing a piece of music that you're inspired to write because you went, for a flight or, paragliding, but it all informs our experiences and makes us more well-rounded people. So, time management be damned, I guess. If you got a cool experience, you can go experience. Why not go do it, right?
I can't agree with you more. Yeah, I mean, that's something that I have the value of experiences, and especially new experiences. The value of that has increased so much to me. And I remember in my early 20s, I had a job at a auto parts store in my hometown, and I was talking to a guy there, and he was telling me about a new job that he was trying to get. And he basically said, if I can get this job, I can work there for 45 years, and then I'll have a pension, and I can retire, and da-da-da-da. And he basically outlined the rest of his entire life in a couple of sentences. And that was terrifying to me. Just absolutely terrifying. And I like to have an idea of where my life is going, and I have goals that I'm working towards, but I want some surprises. I want to try new things and have it be not what I expected. Right. I mean, to me, that's an interesting life. And yeah. The idea that you're going to know, I mean, maybe some people find that comforting, that they're going to know what every day is going to be like. To me, that's terrifying.
I think, and I'm doing the math correctly. You're a couple years younger than me, actually. So, but you're in that millennial, I guess, generation. Right. I think I'm technically considered an elder millennial, whatever that means. But I think we're all in that kind of weird thing where it's like that type of lifestyle that the work the same job for 45 years, retire with a pension. One, it's not even really available for a lot of people now to even like do that. Right. But two, I think a lot of us, kind of see life more as, what experiences are we going to have? What things are we going to do? What things are we going to create? What paths of creativity are we going to explore for ourselves and do these things? There's a lot of news stories and stuff about like, millennials aren't, doing this or doing that or doing, having kids and doing all these things and all that. And sure, there's the financial aspect of all that because, as someone who does have 2 kids, I fully understand why people don't. It can get very pricey very quick. But it's also like, I also, understand when people are, investing more in what makes us happy and what we like. And, more people, in our age range are doing those things. They're, like you are, you're pursuing your passions and doing that. And, awesome. You're being very successful at it, and you're making your way forward. And there's other people who are they're not as so lucky in terms of like success, but they're still investing in their own personal happiness above pension, looking for a pension or looking for that same old every day. And I think that's probably almost a direct response to our parents and the lives they had and things like that. And I think it's a good thing, to be honest, that people are embracing the things they love and they're passionate about. If you're 36 and you want to buy pop vinyl figures and that makes you happy, go do it. Like like you see all those memes like, oh, my parents at 35 and, oh, I'm gonna do this super uber responsible thing, and me, I'm gonna do this whatever whatever jokey quote unquote immature thing is in there. But it's like we're given one spin on this place, and I think a lot of us kind of saw what the other kind of lifestyle did to a lot of our parents and kind of wore them down and things like that. And I think this is maybe the and this is obviously a much bigger discussion than we were having, but it's like the world not exactly be presenting those opportunities for that kind of lifestyle for a lot of people anymore anyway. It's like, well, then why are we gonna keep pushing for it? Why not make ourselves enjoy the things we enjoy while we're here? So no, I mean, I think we're totally on the same page on this. And I mean, I think for some people, well, I mean, it goes back to the sort of the dreams we have when we're kids, and the things that it's like, oh wow, I'd like to do that someday. And then the classic thing as well, then real life hits you and you got to pay the bills and that kind of thing. And that's true, sort of, but it's not impossible to do the things that you dreamed you could do as a kid. I mean, even if Elon Musk probably wanted to build rockets as a kid, and that seems ridiculous, but now he's doing it. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's a cheesy thing to say, but I mean, I think life really is what you make of it. And it's like I guess some people are comfortable with going like a route in life that they might view as safer or more predictable or something like that. But it's not necessarily going to be fulfilling or make you happy. Yeah. And I think it's always, I mean, obviously we're artistic people, right? So, I mean, this is just how we think about life. But, if you get, I think the worst, like this guy I was talking about who summed up his life in a couple of sentences. And it's like, that's terrifying to me. And it's terrifying to me to think that I could get to basically the end of my life and then have all these things that I wish I had tried to do, but I never tried. And I mean, I think, I have been lucky in some ways for sure, but I have a career playing guitar on the internet, and I fly airplanes, and I have an old Jaguar that looks like it's out of a Whitesnake video that I like to drive around. I mean, I have a really bizarre life, but it makes me extremely happy, and it works for me, and and I can still pay my bills, and I have health insurance, I do all the adult stuff, and I do that, and I do the crazy the stuff that I wanted to do when I was a kid, and like I said, there's an element of that is luck, an element is planning and time management, right? But like, if I hope that there are not, if there are people out there listening to this and they have those things that they
want to pursue, but they think like, well, no, realistically, I could never do that. That just doesn't seem likely that it'll work out. You still got to try. You still got to try to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for the longest time when I had a regular, 9 to 5-ish day job, my mentality was always, even if I'm doing this or something like this, like I would always wanted to have, like, I would be happy if whatever paid the bills gave me time to do things I wanted to do. Like
right.
if I was, if my paying the bills was working 80 hours a week and then just not being able to draw or write music or do a podcast or whatever, then I would definitely be less fulfilled. It's a bit of realism with like, okay, I'm not going to make money doing a podcast. I'm not going to, no one gets in the comics to be rich. That's reserved for the very lucky few. If you create The Walking Dead, perhaps. But it's, about pursuing things that make you happy and fulfill you. And that makes, life just that little bit better. And, I never assumed I would do a podcast or, get back, because I was out of music for a few years before coming back into it a few years ago, and like I didn't expect for me to be back into doing these things, but I can do them, and I'm I feel happy when I'm doing them. I feel more fulfilled because I'm getting this opportunity to express myself, and I'm lucky enough to where I have the opportunity and time to do that. But even if I didn't, I would want to try, because
right, yeah.
The alternative just seems so pointless, I guess. But like, maybe that's just our mentality, right? Maybe.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I don't think it is. I think, even if it's, doing recreational sports, or just doing, whatever fun activities, and you have your 9 to 5 job. I mean, we're not going to be on our deathbeds thinking about, man, I really nailed that report back in 08,
Right.
Man, I was really glad I got that promotion. It's going to be like, no, you're going to want to remember these experiences you've had with the people you love and the people you care about and all that. So yeah, it's it's awesome, that you're nailing it and really getting to do that. But it's also even more awesome to hear you recognize that and not be like, not let that be something that's like, makes you feel an overinflated sense of self. You seem incredibly thankful and humbled by the fact that you get to play guitar on the internet and pilot a plane and do all these cool things. And sure, definitely you've worked hard for it, but I think it's also probably something you can appreciate more because you can step back and look at this perspective of like, wow, it's really awesome I get to do all this, not like, and not like, someone more arrogant being like, I deserve this because I worked hard. It's like, yeah, you deserve it, but because you worked hard, but not everyone who works hard gets what they deserve.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
So it's been awesome chatting with you about this. It's been awesome, getting to know you a little bit better, and seeing the person that I've been watching in these videos all these years is, even more so the cool person I thought they were. So thank you very much for, give me this chance to kind of talk to you and get to know you, and hopefully some of my listeners who may not be watching metal YouTube and all that, they check out your channel and do it, because it's really fun stuff, and it's just, yeah, I'm again thankful that you've come on. So I'm not going to keep you any longer. I promise to try to keep it about an hour. So Max, if you could let everybody in internet land know who's listening where they can find you and your awesome stuff.
Sure. Well, yeah, and the feeling's mutual. It's really been great talking with you. And I'm going to look up Black Sad after this. That sounds really good. But Yeah, well, as far as my stuff, obviously GUITARMAX on YouTube, and then you can look up Maxwell Carlisle, which is kind of my, if you want to look up the band stuff that I've done. Officially, I guess I play in an 80s metal band, Hellion, and also a power metal band, Raptor Command. And then I've done a bunch of solo stuff over the years. So, and that can be found in all the usual places, from Maxwell Carlisle or Max Carlisle. And, I'm working on some new stuff too. So basically, I guess just go to the YouTube channel, GUITARMAX. That's really the best way to see what I'm up to.
Yeah, and there'll be links to all this stuff in the show notes. So if you're listening on your podcast player, the links should be right there. You can, click right off of us and go check out all this cool stuff. Yeah, your music that you've put on the channel, that is, I'm not really into that super shreddy stuff. Not because I don't appreciate it or respect it. It's just, not something that's latched onto it. But I really like the stuff you do. It's very melodic, very, very catchy, and very, very cool stuff. So yeah, I think people are definitely going to dig it. So Max, thank you again for coming on.
No problem, man. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening to the Comics Coffee Metal Podcast. Be sure to return next week when I am talking to writer and artist of the acclaimed series Orcs from Boom Studios, Christine Larson.